Reddit, at what moment in your life did you stop, chuckle, and think to yourself, I'm in danger? Fly fishing in Canada and noticed that the forest had suddenly got very quiet. I was with another lad who had been kneeling down eating lunch while I fished. I turned around to move upriver and saw cougars sitting on a rise behind us in the forest. I screamed and started trying to act as big and scary as I could while being the most afraid I have ever been in my life. It all happened in a split second, but I remember feeling absolutely helpless knowing I couldn't reason with this wild animal. The thing gracefully just jumps into the thick of the forest, not making a sound. We were a couple hours in and had to walk out, which was the most terrifying 2 hours of my life. We did it back to back, shouting at anything that moved, just knowing we were being watched. I rang Parks Canada when we got back into reception range and the lady just said, "You're lucky. I've never heard of someone seeing a cougar before it attacked." I was stalked by a cougar once too. It's crazy how quiet they can be. They're terrifying. I was sitting in a tram in Amsterdam and a clearly drunk guy sat next to me and started talking to me in a quite intense way. In a few minutes he managed to regale me most of his life story, including years of imprisonment on separate occasions for violent crimes. He showed me a plastic bag that contained 6 or 7 bloody pork chops he informed me in a hushed voice he stole from a supermarket. He was looking forward to eating them, but had no stove at his place. Did I have a stove? He knew exactly how to cook them. He wanted to share them with me. The only thing I could think of to do to stop this potentially dangerous and very insistent ex-con from following me home was to quickly jump out at a stop just before the doors closed, shouting back I needed to get something here. I heard him say wait for me, but I walked out without looking back, quickly walking past the back of the tram and heading to a canal. I quickly looked back while I was half running forward and saw the guy looking around at the stop, confused, unsteady and clutching pork chops. I spent the next 10 minutes crisscrossing the canals and making my way to a bus to take me home. Needless to say, I shook quite a bit on the way home. That moment when you're gunning it up a hill on an ATV and you're about 90 degrees before the pinnacle and you let off the gas too early, BC, you thought you were gonna flip backwards and everything perpetually slows and then goes completely still before the hill crest, and it's quiet and you know Newton's law, so you just chuckle and think, well, I guess we're gonna roll backwards now and hope for the best. I took a lift from a stranger on a very hot day. As repayment, he requested a hand job. I laughed, got out the car, and walked away. It could have gone horribly wrong, but having just come out of hospital for an attempted suicide, I honestly didn't care about my safety. Fast Eddie. Fast Eddie was a local who was completely harmless when sober and even pretty frickin' funny. When he got drunk, however, was a completely different story. I'm a Mountie and decades ago I was stationed to a remote northern Canadian detachment where the only access was flight. The reserve there that we policed was big and there was only 3 of us, so you had to become friends with the locals or you would probably end up dead. One day he got really drunk and called us and said he has a gun with hostages. He lived in a very remote location and we knew he lived alone and we knew it was unlikely that he did in fact have anyone else in the house, but nonetheless we had to act. So the 3 of us set up a perimeter around his house and did our best to negotiate. There were no hostages and Fast Eddie passed out drunk, but the sound of our police pickup trucks woke him up and he was grouchy at being woken, so he decided to scare us away with a rifle. He said he was aiming at the trucks, but I felt that bullet zip by my ear and strike the lamppost behind me. That was the closest I've been to being killed in my career so far. He was arrested and charged without further incident, which resulted in some probation. Despite almost being killed by him, I loved Fast Eddie. He lived a hard life and was coping with it the best he could. When he was sober, he was probably one of the funniest people I've ever met. R.I.P. buddy. Crazy about Canadians and your gunfights. I was driving up to my grandmother's house and trying to make it before a huge snowstorm swallowed up the interstate for the day. I forgot 2 things before leaving. 1. My tires are starting to bald pretty bad. 2. I was almost out of wiper fluid. Imagine my pleasure when I got past Cumberland and discovered that the interstate had devolved into a slushy, stormy mess. There wasn't anywhere to turn around and they were in the process of plowing it when I was going through. I just followed this trucker in front of me and figured he'd clear anything out of my way. But I also forgot people are stupid fricks that think anything more than 3 feet between two cars on the interstate is wasted space in any situation. So I had to constantly deal with buttholes and two-wheel drive cars power sliding into my safety gap, hanging out for a second while someone else power slides around all three of us, and then power sliding back into the snow to get around the truck. I freaking hate people who speed up just to dive into the space between you and the car you're following, especially when there was nowhere else for them to go and they have to drive the exact same speed you're already going. I gave a classmate a ride home after a night class in college. It was a spur of the moment decision and I figured I'd just drop him off and be on my way. In the car we get to talking and it turns out we both really like the show Lost. It was still airing at the time. He tells me I should come in and watch it, so I agree. We start watching the show and he goes to get me a drink. He didn't ask what I wanted and just brought me a glass of wine, which didn't feel right. I didn't drink at the time and told him that. He was very insistent and wouldn't let up, so I took a sip to placate him. I went to the bathroom and suddenly it all hit me. I didn't really know this guy. I didn't tell anyone where I was, and he kept pushing this drink on me. Maybe he was just being nice, but there were way too many red flags. I told him I had to leave and he blocked the door telling me I couldn't leave without kissing him, which I very much did not want to do. I managed to get out of there with only a hug, but I feel like it could have been much worse. He did continue to text me after I told him I wasn't interested and wouldn't stop until I blocked him on everything. Holy frick, this is terrifying. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I was working in a bucket truck 30 feet in the air when it started to roll backwards down the road. The engine stalled, the park mechanism in the trans was faulty, and the e-brake was slipping. At first I figured I'd just hit the brakes but I had to get down first. As I'm slowly descending on emergency power heading towards a grove of trees, I had the I'm in danger thought. I was the night shift manager at a Sklotsky's deli. I worked with two other people, one a really good friend and the other a new guy who was about 4 inches taller than me and had a record. He'd spent a lot of the shift talking to his baby mama on the phone at the front of the store, which anyone in the dining room could hear. When he started yelling and screaming, I told him to cut it out and that he couldn't spend his shift on the phone. I had to tell him a couple times to get off the phone, and the third time he said, "Oh yeah, what are you gonna do about it?" And I said, "Well, I'll just issue a report with the boss," to which he replied, "And what stopped me from knocking the crap out of you?" I honestly looked at him and said, "Nothing is," and we stared at each other. Fortunately, my co-worker said, "What's stopping you is if you, I'm calling the police and your butt is going back to jail." He ended up getting fired for threatening a manager, but I didn't get punched, which was nice. Sitting in the bank when a really irate man enters. He kept entering then shouting about his missing card and then leaving without listening to advice. He finally returns and shouts, "Don't get me angry. I will return with a gun." I sat and watched him quite unfazed. It was when I saw the shock on the other patrons' faces that it dawned on me that I could die. So what did I do? I chuckled and said to myself, "That's unfortunate." My ex-girlfriend and I were fighting. I'm pretty non-confrontational, and I was just trying to make an omelette in peace. She kept badgering me about how I was a failure, about how I wouldn't amount to anything and that I was wasting my time with my studies. I just got accepted into an awesome DNP program. WHO's wrong now. I reached my breaking point and made a single, insignificant but pointed remark about her choice of work. She's a masseuse by trade. It got quiet, and from behind me, I heard a bottle shatter on the countertop. I'm now the recipient of several large scars on my left shoulder and back. I took the wrong tram at midnight on my first night in a city I have never been in before, and ended up in the middle of nowhere. Police were surrounding the area, and had dogs on leashes sniffing around all over. My phone was out of battery, and I had no idea where I was. I was just like, "Yep, you fricked up." Was at a party at the beach. Some big college party. I knew no one. My friends were elsewhere. I was making conversation with this girl who was sitting sad on the floor with a beer. She looked like she needed company. She was shaken, didn't seem to want to spare too many words. I was worried, but then this shirtless bro dude comes marching over yelling, "Hey man, you wanna frickin' fight? I'll beat your frickin' butt. All my homies will join me." Now, I'm a frickin' geek nerd. This guy shouldn't be threatened by me at all, but he was. One of his friends nodded his head, affirming that yes, multiple men larger than me would totally beat my butt. Whoa, I chuckled, but one of his reasonable friends behind him gestured and said in a way that the bro couldn't hear it, "Dude, just walk away. He's out of his freaking head, just walk away, he won't do crap." I had to walk past the bro to do this, and I said to him, "It's alright man." He just yelled, "That's right little B." Epilogue. Later that night after the bar crawl, guess who I see being dragged back to our hotel? It's the bro. He saunters over to me with the help of his bros keeping him up and he says, "Hey man, I'm sorry about earlier man, we're cool man. You're a cool guy man." I just say, "Yeah, we're cool man," and I laugh to myself because wow, he could have killed me. His bros were willing to help him do it too, and at the end, he's out of his freaking mind. Give it a few years and he will be arrested for domestic abuse. I guarantee it. When I almost drowned into the sea because of huge waves, I fought the waves for 5 minutes, which is a very long time, and then I proceeded to swim furiously to the beach. That rush of adrenaline when I realized water was stronger than me, I will always remember. Brown man here. Took a trip to Big Bend National Park a few years ago with a bunch weed. Got to my campsite in view of the Rio Grande, high AF, and realized that I am on federal land on the US-Mexico border with a not insubstantial quantity of scheduled substance. I've made a huge mistake. Yeah, gotta be careful with that. 100 miles from the border is a zone where some 4th Amendment rights could be suspended. Lived in Rochester for university. Terrible snowy winters. Driving through an intersection in a 95 LeBaron. Lost all control traction. Just spinning in circles through traffic. My friend and I just laughed as he said, "You ready?" Meaning, "Are you prepared for the end?" Responded with, "Hello, I'm with you." It was the complete lack of control in the situation, where everything was up to the universe, fate, chance, etc. Where you just sit back and let it play out. Didn't even turn the music down. Needless to say, we eventually missed all cars and several poles and came to a stop in an empty mall parking lot. No harm and kept going. We were going to Walmart. Was going to my car in the parking lot of the mall I work in. A dude asked me if I knew of any other malls in town. I said no. Said, "Oh, you have a cool style. Do you like crazy looking socks?" I said I did. But when he asked to see mine at the time, I jetted. No good was gonna come from that. After my freshman year in college, I was fording a river on a solo hiking trip that seemed only 2 feet at its deepest point. Nope. Halfway across I am waist deep and the current is so strong that it knocks my hiking sandals clean off my feet, and the only thing stopping me from being flown down the river was my hiking stick and both feet firmly planted against the current. I knew that if I tried to turn around it'd be swept away, and if I took a step forward it'd have the same outcome. I had that self-chuckle holy crap moment, but then decided to take off my pack and throw it as far as I could towards the bank and make a go at it. Threw it, missed the bank, jumped, ended up finally grabbing onto the rocky bank 100 meters downriver after a sickening battle with the rapids. That was stupid, but at least it got my blood moving. A master sergeant told me to check a generator output before the transformer with a multimeter, right about 4000 volts. After a long pause and a realization that he wasn't joking, I thought one of us is gonna die. I refused and he did it and blew up the meter. We never discussed it again. On a 14,000 foot glacier in the Italian Alps, I just wanted a peek around the corner of a prominence. Then I wanted to see if I could get down a bit to take a good picture. Then the scree slid out from under me and I was stuck on the face too far from anyone else, and I knew I couldn't use the gondola to get down. I did a controlled slide to a lower point that just got me in further trouble. Then I knew my life was in danger. For 10 minutes I hung there trying to figure out what to do. Finally I spotted a rotting timber stuck in the ice 40 feet below at an angle. I decided if I could get to it before my feet slid out I could hang there till they found me. I leapt, scrambling across the face of a mini avalanche as I fell at an angle. I reached the board and I held on tight, but it came out of the ground and I started falling down the mountain. so I shoved the board under me and rode it down the glacier for nearly a half mile like a goddamn cartoon character. Somehow it worked. It deposited me in a tailor's field and I hiked back to the refugio in time to see the Alpini mustering in the square to rescue me. They yelled at me something fierce, telling me how many people died on the mountain and how I could have vanished in a crevasse, never to be seen again. Then everyone forgave me and my uncle got me shots of grappa for my heroics. I was 19 and insanely reckless. That was 30 years ago. I was in a play and my character had to be on top of a cheap IKEA desk, in tall stiletto heels. This desk was on top of a large arrangement of flimsy metal stage blocks. I had already fallen off the desk itself during a rehearsal with no costumes before it was put on the staging blocks and sustained a large bruise across my back from hitting the edge of it as I toppled. Opening night. Lights up. I immediately thought, well crap. That's the sort of thing that really shouldn't have passed the risk assessment. My Sil has a cousin with a drinking problem that I did not know of. Well, drunk cousin picked Sil and I up to hang out and she was drunk, which I didn't notice at first till she started swerving, speeding and driving erratically. She then proceeded to stop by a 7-Eleven to buy more wine. Here is where I thought I was in danger. Thankfully my husband wanted me home now and had to leave ASAP. Never did that crap again. Sil equals sister-in-law, OMG guys. Snowboarding in Colorado. Took a spill into a tree well of a large Douglas fir. Where I had fallen you couldn't see me even if you were riding 10 feet from me since I sunk about 4 feet below of level of the snow upon falling in, and was stuck in a bowl-shaped depression in immediate proximity to the tree. Decided to unstrap my board and reverse the orientation of my body so I was facing out of the well only to sink more. I remember it so vividly being like quicksand but worse. Any tiny movement of my body and I would sink a few inches. I ended up being in nipple-deep snow, with my head approximately 4 feet below the level of the glades run 5 feet away. I sat there dead still until someone rode close enough for them to hear me yell. Totally understand how people die in those things. Frequently, I've worked in patient psychiatry for years, and have learned to trust I should take one casual step back and start discreetly checking for my exit if I need it impulse while still listening to somebody respectfully. I once came upon a bad car accident, head-on collision. One driver was more or less okay, the other had bad internal injuries and 2 broken legs. As I got to the car I could see it was full of smoke and flames were coming through the dashboard. The lady was trapped as the steering column came in on top of her a bit, so I jumped in the back, freed her from there and kinda handed her out the back door to some other people who'd just arrived to help. I was left in the car as they took her off, which was fine as I wasn't trapped. But I sat there for just a moment longer in the burning car filled with smoke and soaked it all in as it struck me that I could have died here, and I got out. The car flashed over shortly after and burned to a crisp. After 2 life-saving operations, the lady was okay. Scared the crap out of me. Oh, I've got one. Marching band camp. Sophomore year, I decided to sprint full speed across the parking lot while pulling the very heavy water cart. I remember thinking how fun it was, then wondering how I was gonna stop the cart mid-sprint. Literally laughed to myself going full speed and thought about how dangerous and stupid the thing I was doing was and how there was no way it could end well. I didn't have to stop it, as it hit my heel and I went tumbling. The cart kept rolling and almost took out a few flutes. 1 surgery later I now have a metal plate and 6 screws in my left shoulder. Marching band is no joke, kids. So I woke up one morning feeling kind of empty, like if I'd lost more energy than usual. I slept my usual 8 hours, so it was a bit weird. Can't be the kidney stone I had a week earlier. Never heard of it being a side effect. Can't be the dilaudid. Right, I went to the bathroom, feeling unwell and started throwing up. It was brownish with hues of red. I thought like an idiot. Guess I need more sleep. I fed the cats and went back to sleep, thinking I just needed a power nap of some sort to feel refreshed. An hour later, I woke up sweating like a beast and even more empty in terms of energy than before. I tried to get up but it felt like I could faint just from walking. My roommate had already left for work, so I had no one to rely on too. I dragged myself once more to the bathroom, violently vomiting brown red liquid once again and feeling like I was in a volcano. I was able to draw myself a really low amount of water in the bath and climbed in just to try and reduce my temperature. As I got in, I felt a tad better, but I had no energy left and felt myself lose consciousness. My god, I'm gonna die in this bathtub. Luckily I regained consciousness not long after and called the ambulance, and like an idiot, instead of waiting for them, I got dressed and limped to the lobby of my building because I did not want to be a nuisance to them and make them work harder by climbing to the 3rd floor. EMT thought I might be okay since I walked by myself until I started vomiting again in front of him. Turns out the anti-inflammatory they gave me for the kidney stone, naproxen, was something my stomach didn't like. So I developed a big ulcer that bursted inside and I was bleeding internally. Stayed a week at the ICU because I lost too much blood. Scariest crap to date in my life. I'm Hispanic but pretty light skinned so I can pass for white. Anyways, I'm in college in North Texas about a decade ago, and we were at a house party in the dead of winter. There was this guy there who looked friendly enough. A big guy with a shaved head and tats, most of which were covered up by a long sleeved shirt. At some point late in the evening the conversation turned to drugs. He mentioned that he knew where we could get some coke, so everyone pitched in and nominated me to go with him and pick up. I get in his car and he drives me to a part of town I'm not familiar with, all the while boasting that he could get me any drug I wanted. Pills, crack, PCP, you name it. We arrive at this fairly large house on a dark street and go in. There's a group of about 6 other guys and a couple of girls. They seem friendly and immediately offer me a bowl to smoke while I wait for the coke. As I'm sitting there I look around and realize all the dudes had the same basic look. White guys with shaved heads, lots of tats. That's when I look up and notice the big Nazi flag hanging on the wall. I kept telling myself, keep it cool, they think you're white. Be cool, don't act Latino, don't act Latino. We completed the pickup and he drove me back to the party, but for a moment there I was definitely like, oh crap, I'm in danger. I was about to do a skydive in Australia, about 3 weeks after 3 people died at a different location. I'm sat on the edge of the plane's floor, feet hanging out into the wind at 14,000 feet with minimal safety briefing. All I can think is, well, if he blacks out I'm dead. So I laughed and we fell out of a plane and I'm still here to type this. I was alone on a train from Zurich to Paris. I had a window seat and a huge, muscly man came and sat next to me, and then he started crying and shouting and punching the seat in front of him. I was quite convinced he was going to start punching me instead at any moment. He was not really on this planet and obviously really hurting about something. Sometimes he'd go quiet and I'd relax and start to feel better about the next 3 hours, but then he'd suddenly clap his hands together really loudly, making me jump out of my skin, and go back to crying and punching the seat. It was quite distressing. At one point he got up and went away. I thought I was safe, but instead he came back with a croissant and angrily ate that while crying. Now I had crumbs to contend with too. The second time he got up to look for more pastry, 2 lovely girls motioned for me to come and sit with them on their table seat. I did and thanked them in my terrible French. He came back, sat down and went back to crying and punching the seat, but he was at least away from me. Then 2 horrible American boys got on at a station. They were playing music from a phone, so I already hated them. They saw the empty seat next to me and the empty seat next to the angry crying man, and they asked him if he'd mind sitting next to me so they could sit together. Obviously he obliged and I got to spend the next hour jumping out of my skin as he started bashing the table instead. I didn't die, but that put me off train travel in Europe for a while. I was drinking heavily in a bar in Jerusalem when a group of soldiers came in and yelled at everyone to get into the basement. I grabbed my drinks, headed down with everyone, and listened to a fight outside the bar. I then slept for a half hour, woke up to silence, finished my drinks, and kept the part going. My friend, his girlfriend, and I were at the bar getting pee when the girlfriend overhears a couple of large men fighting. She decides it's her responsibility to stop their fight and inserts herself into the fray. The large men stop fighting each other and begin to drunkenly harass her. She doesn't leave the situation because she's drunk and stupid, so it escalates to the point where we have to intervene. These guys are a good head and shoulders taller than me and I'm a good foot taller than my friend, so I'm thinking we are definitely gonna get manhandled in this situation. Girlie goes and sits down now that she's caused such a commotion and the large men start swinging at us. Luckily I knew the bouncer and he saw everything and helped us send the guys packing. But we took a couple half-assed drunk punches because my friend's girlfriend is a drunk antagonizing bee. Probably when I was entering this bar downtown and I overheard this woman whisper, "Please." I need it to the giant bouncer guarding the door. Then I see the bouncer's hand pull out a tiny blue baggie with a white powdery substance inside of it out of his pocket and slip it to her. And then I realize he was looking directly at me the entire time. Went on a road trip with my buddy and we stopped at his parents'. They live in a bad neighborhood and my buddy told me Jay needed to drive faster or there was a chance someone would shoot at us. I looked at him like he was crazy, but he was pretty dang serious. When I was in hospital because of broken back and docs said I need a big operation or I will be in wheelchair with impotence and incontinence. Back in the day I knew this guy who everyone assumes knew everything about drugs. So when he'd dose you, most people assumed he knew it was safe. So I go over and he says he's got some Vivance, an amphetamine, similar to Adderall. Well, I take the delayed release pill and wait 50 minutes and there's nothing, so he says open up another, crush up the beads and then snort that. I ask if it's safe and he says probably, which concerned me, but I did it. Another 30 minutes later he offers me some Ritalin. Well, I went home and didn't feel anything until I sat down in my chair. Holy freaking crap. I was focused like a goddamn laser. I was writing out Reddit posts and before I could finish one I jumped to another. But soon enough I was switching between great enthusiasm and depression over even thinking it was a good idea. I was bipolar as heck. Another hour later I was beating the frick out of my meat. I went for maybe 4 hours. It was now 8 AM when I noticed my heart was beating like I'd just seen a freaking bear. Something crazy like 130 or 140 BPM. So I got up and started pacing around the house. My mom got up and I almost wanted to say something was up, but I just said I hadn't slept and had drank a lot of coffee. Well, from 8 to 2 PM my heart stayed beating just as fast. It was freaking terrifying. Only started to calm down in the afternoon, but I stayed up until I was too tired to worry. I credit that single moment to giving me heart-related hypochondria for 9 months after that. If you're going to do a drug, read up on it first. Pharmacy-grade drugs can have really high doses. I was on Vivance for ADHD. That crap made me a zombie. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.